He left her at the altar, but it wasn't betrayal. It was a deadly family curse. A love built through laughter, secrets, and dreams is tested like never before. Will she ever forgive him, or will fate keep them apart forever? Before you continue, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this powerful story. The rain fell like shards of glass, sharp and sudden, drenching the city streets in a silver haze. Amara pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, cursing under her breath as the umbrella she'd bought that morning collapsed in the wind. She hated the rain. It made her hair frizzy, her makeup streaked, and her carefully chosen outfit useless. But tonight, she had no choice. She had a meeting, an interview that could change her life, and she couldn't risk arriving soaked. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the car sliding on the slick pavement until it was almost too late. A shout broke through the noise of traffic, a male voice, commanding and urgent, and suddenly a hand shot out, gripping her arm and yanking her back, just as a car swerved past inches from her toes. Heart pounding, she looked up into eyes so blue they seemed almost unreal, like sunlight piercing a stormy sky. "Are you okay?" the man asked, his voice steady, but there was a flicker of something unspoken in his gaze. Fear? Worry? She couldn't tell. I think so," she stammered, trying to catch her breath. Her chest heaved, and for a brief, shocking moment, she felt a warmth in his presence that contrasted sharply with the cold rain. He offered her a hand, and she hesitated, torn between caution and an inexplicable trust. Something about him, calm, controlled, and yet undeniably urgent, made it impossible to pull away. "I'm Ethan," he said, introducing himself as if they'd known each other for years, not minutes. "You shouldn't be standing out here in this weather alone." Amara nodded, managing a small smile despite her racing heart. "Amara. And thank you." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain drummed around them, the city bustling on as if nothing had happened. But for Amara, the world had narrowed to the man before her. He smelled faintly of cedar and leather, his coat sleek, almost too perfect for a stranger, pulled from the shadows of a rainy street. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, curiosity softening the intensity in his eyes. I moved recently," she admitted. "Just started a new job, trying to survive the city, one puddle at a time." She laughed nervously, and he chuckled, a deep, rich sound that vibrated in her chest. Ethan extended his arm. "Then let me at least make sure you get somewhere safe. Rain like this, it has a way of finding trouble." Amara glanced at the darkened streets and the thinning crowd of pedestrians, then at his arm. Against her better judgment, she placed her hand tentatively in his, surprised at the firmness of his grip. They walked in silence for a few blocks, the rain painting streaks on their faces and coats. Every so often, Ethan's eyes flicked to hers, scanning, analyzing, and she felt almost exposed under that gaze, but in a strangely comforting way. He wasn't just looking, he was seeing her. "You know," he said finally, his voice low and thoughtful, "most people would have run past without even noticing you were in danger." Amara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And you? You just stop?" "I don't ignore things that matter," he said, almost cryptically, and she caught the shadow of a frown that didn't match his calm tone. Something unsettled lingered in his expression, though he quickly masked it with a polite smile. Before she could ask, a streetlight flickered above them, and a sudden gust of wind sent a spray of rain over their heads. Amara gasped, but Ethan's hand tightened slightly around hers, anchoring her. "Careful," he warned, and for a fleeting moment, It wasn't just concern, it was with warning. They reached her apartment building, and she turned to him, ready to thank him again. But the moment she opened her mouth, a call on his phone pulled his attention away. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. I, I have to go, he said abruptly. Something's come up. Take care of yourself, Amara. You're stronger than you look. Before she could protest, he was gone, melting into the rainy night, leaving only the echo of his presence and that lingering, impossible sense that he had changed something inside her. Amara stared after him, the city humming around her, her pulse stubbornly refusing to slow. Who was he? Why did her chest ache at the thought of a stranger disappearing into the night? And why did she feel deep down that this was only the beginning of something far larger, far darker, and far more dangerous? The rain kept falling, but Amara didn't move. She knew somehow that the man who had saved her tonight would return. She just didn't know when or what he would bring with him. The morning after the rainstorm lingered like a memory, painting the city streets with a pale, misty light. Amara could still feel the tremor of adrenaline from the night before, the way Ethan's hand had gripped hers, firm and protective. She had replayed the encounter endlessly on the subway ride to work, wondering if it had been real, or if the city, in its endless chaos, had conjured a stranger just to shake her heart awake. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. A new message flashed on the screen. "Coffee? There's something I need to show you." E. Her pulse quickened. E? Could it be Ethan? She debated ignoring it. Logic screamed caution. But curiosity, that relentless spark, won. She typed back, "Where?" Minutes later, she found herself stepping into a quiet little cafe tucked between two office buildings, the smell of roasted coffee beans mingling with the faint scent of rain still clinging to the city. And there he was, Ethan, leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair damp, and that impossible calm about him that made everything around him seem muted, less urgent. "Amara," he said, voice low, almost warm, a smile teasing his lips. "Glad you came." She returned a hesitant smile, unsure why she felt both nervous and thrilled. "I wasn't sure you were real," she admitted. His laugh was soft, a hint of something deeper hiding behind it. "I assure you, very real. And I promise I don't bite unless provoked." They ordered drinks, and Ethan led her to a small corner table by the foggy window. Outside, the city moved in slow, glistening waves, rain puddles reflecting the morning sun. Inside, the warmth between them was immediate, tangible. They talked about ordinary things at first, her work, his seemingly casual career in finance, but beneath the surface, every glance and gesture carried weight. Amara noticed how Ethan listened, really listened, like he could read the spaces between her words. She shared a story about her first day at her new job, fumbling with a presentation, and he laughed genuinely, but with a strange undertone of empathy that made her chest tighten. "So, you survived the city after all," he said, tilting his head, eyes sharp, yet unreadable. "That's impressive. Most people get swallowed whole." "Mostly by puddles," she teased, and he chuckled, a sound that made her feel dizzy. "And traffic." Their conversation meandered, flowing from trivial topics to personal dreams. Amara found herself revealing things she never told casual acquaintances. The ambition that pushed her forward, the fear of being ordinary, the small heartbreaks of past loves. Ethan shared glimpses of his own life, carefully curated, a love of music, a talent for painting, a few stories that hinted at a complex past, but nothing concrete. Yet there was a subtle tension, like a shadow at the corner of a room. Sometimes his eyes would darken just slightly when a memory passed behind them, and he would quickly smile, returning to the present. Amara felt it, but chose not to question him. There was something magnetic, irresistible about him, and the unease only heightened the thrill. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The cafe emptied, and the warm sunlight gave way to the pale gold of late afternoon. Ethan finally leaned back, stretching, his gaze lingering on her face with something unspoken. "I'm glad we met again," he said softly. "Some encounters are meant to repeat themselves." Amara's heart fluttered. "Some encounters change you," she whispered, realizing she already felt different, more alive, more vulnerable, more aware. He glanced at his watch suddenly, his expression tightening for a fraction of a second. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "But we'll continue this." Before she could ask when, he was gone again, slipping out into the bustling streets as if he had never existed, leaving only the echo of his presence and the subtle warmth of his hand brushing against hers. Alone, Amara stared at the empty chair, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Something about him was dangerous, she realized. Not in the obvious way, the kind of danger you could avoid, but the kind that burrows deep into your chest, twisting your pulse, your thoughts, your dreams. She knew, even without understanding why, that meeting Ethan was not an accident, and that her life was already beginning to unravel beautifully and irreversibly. A sudden chill ran down her spine. Somewhere deep, Ethan carried secrets. Secrets that would change everything. And yet, she couldn't wait to see him again. The city was different when Amara saw it with Ethan. Rain had become a backdrop for laughter instead of anxiety, and even the hum of traffic felt almost musical when he was beside her. They had met again that evening, almost by chance, in a small art gallery tucked behind a busy avenue. The air smelled faintly of paint and wood polish, a quiet sanctuary from the chaos outside. Ethan stood beside her, tall and composed, his hand brushing lightly against hers as they wandered past canvases and sculptures. She noticed how he paused at each piece, studying it, not for its technical merit, but for the emotion it conveyed. Something in him resonated with art, with life in all its subtle shades. "You see the story behind it, not just the colors," she remarked, feeling a surge of admiration for the way he perceived the world. He glanced at her, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "Stories are everything," he said softly. "Sometimes we just need to listen carefully to hear them." Amara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from the air conditioning, but from the quiet intensity of the man beside her. He had a way of making ordinary moments feel extraordinary, of making her feel seen in a way no one ever had. They wandered to a small cafe inside the gallery. Coffee in hand, they talked for hours, sharing stories, confessions, and dreams. Amara laughed more than she had in months, her voice carrying freely across the empty space. Ethan's laughter blended with hers, warm and restrained, yet it struck something deep inside her. But beneath his calm exterior, there were subtle cracks. Occasionally, his gaze would drift to the window, distant, almost haunted, before he forced a polite smile and returned his attention to her. Amara noticed, but each time she started to ask, he would skillfully divert the conversation, leaving a flicker of mystery behind. As the evening deepened, the gallery's lights dimmed. Shadows stretched across the walls, painting them in golden amber. Ethan turned to her suddenly, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Amara, he began, and she caught the tension in his voice, the way his jaw tightened slightly. Yes? She asked, heart fluttering. I I enjoy being with you, he said carefully, his eyes searching hers. I don't say this lightly, but I feel something with you I haven't felt in a long time. Her chest tightened. Words threatened to escape, but she let the silence hang, savoring the gravity of the moment. Something raw and unspoken passed between them, a connection that both thrilled and terrified her. They left the gallery together, stepping into the cool evening. The streets glistened with leftover rain, neon signs reflecting on wet asphalt. Ethan offered his coat, and she accepted, shivering slightly as he draped it over her shoulders. His hand lingered for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and she caught herself imagining what it would feel like to fall completely into him, to let down all barriers she had built around her heart. Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened. They shared late-night walks under the city lights, quiet dinners in tucked-away restaurants, and long conversations where they bared pieces of their souls. Amara met some of Ethan's friends, saw his charm and kindness ripple outward, yet still glimpsed that shadow, a hint of something he carried silently. One afternoon, as they sat on a park bench, Ethan's expression darkened. He glanced toward a group of children playing nearby, his jaw tightening as he pulled something from his coat, a small, worn photograph. "Who is that?" Amara asked softly, noticing the faded image of a woman she didn't recognize. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he tucked the photograph away. "Someone from a long time ago. A part of my family I don't talk about much." His voice was calm, but she sensed a weight behind it, something unspoken. Amara reached out, placing her hand gently over his. "You can tell me when you're ready." He looked at her, a mixture of longing and fear in his eyes. "I want to," he said quietly, "but some truths can hurt the people you love most." Her pulse quickened. She didn't understand the full meaning of his words, but she felt the gravity, the tension. Love was growing between them, yes, but beneath it, a shadow lingered, a promise that their happiness might come at a cost they could not yet see. And yet, despite the unease, Amara found herself drawn further into him. Every smile, every laugh, every quiet glance fueled a fire she couldn't resist. She knew something about Ethan was dangerous, but some fires were worth the risk. As they parted that evening, he kissed her hand softly, lingering for just a moment longer than polite. "Sleep well, Amara," he whispered, voice low, almost reverent. "Tomorrow is another story." And she believed him. She didn't know what story awaited, but she knew deep in her heart that their story had only begun. The weeks that followed felt almost unreal to Amara, like stepping into a dream she had longed for without ever admitting it. Ethan was no longer just a mysterious stranger. He had become her anchor, her confidant, the quiet rhythm that steadied her heartbeat in a chaotic city. They spent weekends exploring the city's hidden corners, bookstores tucked between office blocks, tiny bakeries that smelled of cinnamon and sugar, and quiet riverside paths where the water shimmered in the morning sun. Amara loved watching Ethan observe the world, his attention to detail, the way he smiled at a stray cat or paused to listen to a busker's song. It made her feel that life, with all its mundane and beautiful moments, was meant to be savored. One evening, they sat in Ethan's apartment, a sleek, minimal space filled with warm light and books stacked on every surface. Amara leaned against him as they shared a quiet dinner, the city skyline glowing behind the floor-to-ceiling window. "I've been thinking," Ethan began, his voice soft, almost hesitant. Amara looked up, curious. "You've been thinking?" she teased, smiling. He chuckled but didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took her hand in his, warm and firm. "About us, about the future, about what life could be like together." Her heart skipped. "Together?" she whispered, not daring to breathe too loud, as if saying it aloud might shatter the fragile perfection of the moment. "Yes," he said. His gaze was steady, but there was an undercurrent of tension, something she couldn't quite place. "I want to build something with you. Not just moments, not just days, but a life." The words were intoxicating. Amara felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, a mixture of joy and disbelief. "I want that too," she said softly. They began to make plans, small at first. A weekend getaway, a shared apartment, even discussions of future careers and dreams. Each plan was a thread, weaving them closer together, creating a tapestry of hope and possibility. But beneath the laughter and excitement, Ethan carried a quiet, unspoken burden. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, his hands would tremble slightly as he touched a worn photograph tucked into his wallet. Shadows would cross his face, fleeting but unmistakable, before he forced a smile and returned to normal. One afternoon, Amara discovered a small, intricately carved wooden box in his apartment. Inside were letters, some yellowed and faded with age, and a series of photographs of women she didn't recognize. She hesitated, her curiosity wrestling with her instinct to leave it alone. "Who are these?" she asked quietly, not wanting to startle him. Ethan froze, his jaw tightening. He took a deep breath and placed a hand over hers. "Family," he said simply. "Some of these stories are complicated, some unfortunate." Amara studied him, sensing the weight behind his words, but choosing not to pry further. Love had taught her patience, and she understood that some secrets had to be revealed in their own time. Days later, while they walked along the riverside, a sudden gust of wind scattered papers from a nearby stall. One of them, a faded document, blew at Ethan's feet. He bent to pick it up, eyes narrowing at the name written on it. For a moment, his fingers lingered, and she saw the flicker of fear pass across his face. "Everything okay?" she asked, concerned. He smiled, forcing a casual shrug. "Just memories." But Amara knew better. There was more, something lurking in the edges of his life, a shadow that threatened to touch the happiness they were building. Even so, they continued. Every laugh, every shared secret, every late-night conversation strengthened their bond. Amara felt herself falling deeper, willingly, dangerously. She could feel Ethan's heart in the warmth of his hand, the quiet strength of his embrace. And yet, somewhere in the depths of his gaze, a storm brewed, one he had yet to reveal. That storm would not wait forever. The apartment was unusually quiet that evening. Rain tapped gently against the window, a soft percussion that filled the space between them. Amara curled on the sofa, a blanket around her shoulders, while Ethan sat in the armchair across from her, staring at the wooden box she had found days ago. "You're avoiding it," Amara said softly, her eyes meeting his. Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands folded on his lap. "I'm not avoiding anything," he said, voice measured, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "You are," she pressed gently. "I saw you the other day, with that photograph. Something's troubling you." I need to know. He sighed, leaning back, eyes tracing the patterns of rain on the glass. Amara, some things about my family, they aren't simple stories. They're complicated, painful, dangerous even. Her heart skipped. Dangerous? Ethan, what are you saying? He hesitated, then reached into the wooden box. Pulling out an old, folded letter, he handed it to her. The paper was yellowed with age, ink faded, yet the words were legible. Every love he gives will carry misfortune. The women of this family, they are cursed by our name. Amara's breath caught. A curse? He nodded, his gaze distant. It's been passed down for generations. Every woman, someone in my family, loves deeply, suffers. I've seen it. I've lived it. And I can't let that happen to you. A chill ran down her spine. But you love me. I do, he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. That's what makes this so dangerous. I can't stop it. I've tried, I've lost, and I cannot risk losing you too. Her hands trembled as she reached out, brushing his cheek. Then let me decide. Let me share this burden with you. We'll find a way together. Ethan shook his head, a flicker of pain crossing his features. You don't understand. It's not just heartbreak. It's accidents, illnesses, tragedies that I can't prevent. If I stay, it will happen to you. I've seen it destroy lives, Amara. I can't be the cause of your suffering. Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan, I trusted you. I love you. And now you're telling me that all of this, us, was a risk you were willing to bear alone? He stood abruptly, moving to the window. Rain streaked the glass as he stared out at the city, a man torn between love and duty. I have to think. I have to plan. I can't. I won't let anything happen to you. Amara followed him, heart aching. Then let me help you. Don't shut me out. He turned, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and for a moment, the barrier between them seemed impossibly high. Some things cannot be fixed, not even with love. The night stretched on, filled with unspoken words. Amara realized that love alone might not be enough to conquer the darkness Ethan carried. Yet, despite the fear, she could not turn away. Every fiber of her being wanted to fight for him, to fight for them, to defy whatever curse haunted his family. Ethan sat back down finally, pulling her close, his forehead resting against hers. I never wanted to hurt you, he murmured, but some sacrifices, some truths, are unavoidable. Amara felt his trembling hands, the weight of generations of sorrow pressing down on him, and in that moment, she understood loving him was not just a choice, it was a risk, a beautiful, terrifying, life-altering risk, and she was willing to take it. The spring evening was alive with color. Cherry blossoms fluttered along the riverside path, carried by a gentle breeze that smelled of rain and new beginnings. Amara walked beside Ethan, her fingers intertwined with his, feeling the steady warmth of his hand. They had spent the day exploring the city's hidden gardens, a quiet escape from their busy lives, and now they paused on a small stone bridge overlooking the river. Ethan's gaze was fixed on the rippling water below, his expression contemplative, almost distant. Amara followed his eyes, sensing the tension in the quiet moment. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly, her voice carrying the curiosity and concern that had grown with their love. He turned to her, blue eyes bright but shadowed with something she couldn't name. "Amara, I want to ask you something," he said, his voice low but steady, something that matters more than anything else to me. Her heart skipped a beat. She tried to mask her anticipation with a teasing smile. Is this one of those dramatic moments where you profess your undying love? He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. More than that, I want us together, forever, but I need you to understand what that means. Amara tilted her head, curiosity warring with unease. I'm listening. He reached into his coat pocket, producing a small, velvet box. The city seemed to pause. The river, the blossoms, the distant hum of traffic, all fading into the background. He knelt before her, rain-damp hair sticking slightly to his forehead, eyes locked on hers. Amara, he began, voice trembling ever so slightly, from the moment I met you, my life changed. You've brought light into the shadows I've carried for years. I can't imagine a future without you by my side. Will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes, her chest tightening with emotion. Yes, she whispered, barely able to form the words, and the small box opened to reveal a simple yet elegant ring that seemed to glow in the fading sunlight. He slid the ring onto her finger, his hands lingering just a moment too long, and they embraced, the city and river witnessing their union of hearts. Amara felt invincible, as if nothing, no curse, no past, no shadow, could touch the bond they had forged. But Ethan pulled back slightly, just enough for her to see the storm behind his blue eyes. Amara, there's something I need to tell you, he murmured, voice tight with struggle. I've carried a secret my entire life, a curse that follows every woman my family loves deeply. I've tried to protect you, to fight it, but her brow furrowed. But what? I can't promise that our love won't bring pain, he admitted, words heavy with sorrow. I've seen it destroy those before us. I don't want to lose you, yet I fear the cost of staying together. Amara's hands cupped his face, desperate to erase the shadow from his expression. Ethan, we've faced every moment together, every secret, every fear. Love is our choice. I choose you, even if the world tries to tear us apart. He closed his eyes briefly, taking in her words, drawing strength from her conviction. I wish it were that simple, he whispered. The wind rustled the cherry blossoms, scattering petals over them like confetti. For a brief, magical moment, nothing else existed, just the promise of love, fragile, yet brilliant. Yet, in the back of Ethan's mind, the family curse gnawed relentlessly. Every smile, every touch, every future they planned became entwined with a quiet dread he could not shake. That dread, silent and unyielding, would follow him even into the happiest day of their lives, threatening to shatter everything they had built. As they walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, hands clasped and hearts racing, Amara felt the world bending perfectly around them. She didn't see the shadow lurking in Ethan's eyes, the storm he kept tightly contained, one that would eventually force him to make the unthinkable choice, to abandon the woman he loved most, in order to protect her from the very curse he carried. For now, though, they were together, and for now, love reigned supreme. The city seemed to sparkle with anticipation, as though even the streets knew of Amara and Ethan's impending union. Spring had painted the parks in pastel blooms, the air perfumed with fresh flowers and rain-kissed pavement. Every detail of the wedding was meticulously planned. Amara's dress, chosen with delicate lace and soft ivory silk, the venue adorned with cascading roses and twinkling fairy lights, and the guest list carefully curated to include only those who mattered most. Ethan moved alongside her through the florist's shop, his tall frame shadowing her as they selected peonies and lilies for the centerpieces. "You have an eye for beauty," he remarked softly, his hand brushing against hers as he passed her a sample bouquet. "And you have an eye for everything else," she teased, smiling. But she noticed the way his eyes flickered toward a faded photograph, tucked in the corner of the shop, a reflexive glance, quick and unintentional. He caught her gaze, forcing a small smile. "Just memories," he said lightly, but the shadow in his eyes betrayed him. Amara felt a flutter of unease, though she tried to ignore it. Days turned into weeks, each filled with laughter, excitement, and careful planning. They tasted cakes, debated music playlists, and chose invitations that reflected the story of their love. At night, they would sit in Ethan's apartment, reviewing seating charts and floral arrangements, his arm around her shoulders, their fingers intertwined. Yet even in these moments of joy, small signs of the curse crept in like whispers. A candle flickered unnaturally in the corner. An unexpected gust of wind blew petals across the table, and Ethan's hands would sometimes tremble ever so slightly when he held hers. Each time, he would mask it with a smile, but Amara began to notice. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked one evening, studying the faint tension in his jaw. "I'm fine," he replied, though his eyes betrayed a storm he could not name. "Just thinking about everything coming together." Amara nodded, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. But she didn't press. Love had taught her patience, and she trusted him, even if the shadows around him hinted at dangers she could not yet understand. Rehearsals began, bringing together friends and family in a cascade of laughter, music, and mild chaos. Ethan was charming, attentive, and effortlessly graceful, yet occasionally his smile would falter for a heartbeat, eyes darting to some unseen memory or worry. Amara would catch the fleeting shadow and squeeze his hand, silently reminding him that she was there. One evening, while reviewing the final arrangements for the ceremony, a small accident occurred. A candle tipped over, narrowly missing a table of delicate lace decorations. Ethan's reaction was immediate, protective, yet a flash of fear crossed his eyes. "It's nothing," he said quickly, brushing it off. But Amara saw it, another hint of the curse's subtle power, whispering its presence even in moments meant to be joyous. Despite the undercurrent of unease, the couple thrived on the excitement. They danced together in the empty hall, laughter echoing, petals from earlier floral arrangements falling around them, creating a surreal, magical moment. Amara rested her head against Ethan's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She tried to ignore the fleeting shadows, the unexplained accidents, and the strange heaviness that sometimes fell over him. Yet, as the final week approached, Ethan became more withdrawn, his mind clearly burdened by something unspeakable. He would stare into the night sky from the balcony, tracing the stars as if seeking answers among them. Amara wanted to reach out, to pull him back into the warmth of their love, but she realized that some battles he fought alone, and that the curse's shadow was one such battle. The city lights shimmered below as they held each other quietly, petals falling in the soft glow of lanterns. It was perfect. It was magical. It was fragile. And Ethan knew, deep in his heart, that the day of joy might also be the day of heartbreak, the day he would have to make the most impossible choice of his life. For now, though, the love between them shone brighter than any shadow. For now, they could dream of forever. The night before the wedding, The city was quiet, as if holding its breath. Lights shimmered along the streets, reflecting in puddles left by a gentle rain. Amara sat in her room, dress hanging nearby, the soft hum of preparations in the background. Her excitement was nearly tangible, her heart racing with anticipation for the day that would mark the beginning of forever. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Ethan entered, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the candlelit room. He carried a small bouquet of her favorite flowers, peonies mixed with lilies, and a hesitant smile. "They're beautiful," she whispered, taking them from him. "I wanted you to have them tonight," he said, his voice low, yet there was a tremor she could not ignore. She stepped closer, brushing a stray strand of hair from his forehead. "Are you nervous?" she asked gently. He laughed softly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Nervous doesn't even begin to cover it," he admitted. "There's a lot I wish I could say, a lot I wish I could fix before tomorrow." Amara's smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, running a hand through his damp hair. "Some things aren't fixable, not even with love. And some things can't be avoided." Before she could question him further, a sudden gust of wind blew through the slightly open window, scattering papers from her desk. Among them, a small, yellowed photograph slipped from the corner of the pile and landed at Ethan's feet. His eyes narrowed as he bent to retrieve it, jaw tightening, hands trembling slightly. "Ethan, what is it?" she asked, concern coloring her voice. "Nothing," he said quickly, slipping it back into his pocket. "Just memories." That night, as they lay side by side, the weight of silence pressed heavily on Ethan. Amara felt his restlessness, the tension radiating from him despite the warmth of their embrace. "I don't want to wake tomorrow feeling—" He trailed off, voice barely audible in the dark. "Feeling what?" she prompted softly. "Regret, pain, loss," he whispered. I I keep thinking about the curse, about the women before you, about everything I've seen it destroy. I can't shake it, Amara." She turned to face him, brushing her hand against his cheek. "We can't live in fear of what might happen. We've fought for every moment together. Love isn't about avoiding risk. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard." He closed his eyes, swallowing hard. "I wish it were that simple," he murmured. The night passed fitfully. Ethan paced the apartment for a while, staring out the rain-streaked windows, tracing patterns in the condensation, muttering fragments of thoughts she couldn't fully understand. Amara watched him, torn between worry and the desire to comfort him, but she knew there were battles he had to face alone. As dawn approached, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. The cherry blossoms outside her window, so vibrant just days before, were now drenched by the morning rain, petals scattered across the street like silent omens. When Ethan finally returned to her side, he held her hand tightly, eyes searching hers. "No matter what happens tomorrow," he began, voice breaking slightly, "know that I love you more than life itself." Amara's heart ached at the raw vulnerability in his words. "And I love you," she replied, leaning into him. "Nothing will change that." Outside, the city awoke, unaware of the storm brewing in the hearts of two people about to pledge their lives together. The curse, silent and relentless, loomed closer, its shadow stretching toward the day that was meant to be perfect. And for Ethan, the weight of that shadow was growing heavier by the hour, threatening to turn their dream wedding into a nightmare he could not prevent. The morning sun spilled through the cathedral windows, casting a warm glow over the white marble aisle lined with flowers. Everything was perfect, almost painfully so. Guests whispered in hushed excitement, laughter floated lightly through the air, and the soft notes of a piano filled the grand hall. Amara sat in the bridal suite, her fingers trembling as she adjusted her veil, her heart racing with anticipation. "Are you ready?" her maid of honor asked, smiling. Amara nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. She felt an inexplicable tension in the air, a weight pressing down on her chest. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan. She had not seen him since last night's tender moments. Surely he would appear any minute, bringing with him the love that had guided her through months of hope and fear. Outside, the city seemed calm, but Ethan's world was a storm. He had spent the night in restless thought, pacing the apartment and staring at the old letters and photographs that carried the burden of his family's curse. Every memory of the women who had loved and suffered under the shadow of his lineage haunted him. Their smiles turned to tears, their happiness destroyed by accidents, illness, and misfortune that he could not prevent. He had promised himself he would protect Amara at all costs, and he had realized something unbearable. The only way to save her from the curse was to leave her before it could touch her life. As he approached the cathedral, the weight in his chest grew heavier with each step. He passed the bustling florists, the musicians tuning their instruments, the guests who had traveled from far and wide to celebrate their union. Every joyful sight twisted painfully in his heart. He had built a future with Amara, dreamed of forever, and now he had to destroy it, all to save her. Inside, Amara smiled nervously as she descended the staircase, her father's arm steadying her. Her eyes sought Ethan's across the aisle. The room seemed to hold its breath, but he was not there. Confusion flickered across her face. "Where is he?" she whispered. Her father's expression was tight, worried. He must have stepped outside," he said cautiously, though doubt lingered in his tone. Minutes passed, the guests growing restless, the music lingering in an uneasy pause. Amara's smile faltered, replaced by a gnawing unease. She tried to calm herself, telling her heart that Ethan would arrive any moment, that this was just a minor delay, but the truth gnawed at her soul. He had made the impossible choice. He could not bear the thought of their love being destroyed by the curse. He could not risk seeing her happiness shattered, or worse, her life endangered. Ethan's eyes filled with tears as he lingered on the edge of the cathedral square, hidden from view. His hands clenched at his sides, the small wooden box of letters and photographs buried in his coat pocket like a shard of ice against his heart. "I love you," he whispered to the wind, hoping she could feel it somehow. "I will always love you." Amara stood alone at the altar, the whispers of guests fading into the background, her heart breaking in slow, silent increments. She could feel the absence of his presence like a physical weight pressing against her chest. Every memory of laughter, tenderness, and whispered promises now felt fragile, distant. When the ceremony began without him, the room blurred. Flowers, sunlight, the expectant faces, all dissolved into a haze of disbelief. She wanted to run, to call him, to demand answers, but no sound came from her lips. Outside, Ethan turned away, walking into the waiting streets, each step heavy with heartbreak. He did not look back, not because he did not love her, but because he loved her too much to stay. To stay would mean risking everything, her life, her joy, her future. The curse had won in one sense, but he chose to fight it in another. By sacrificing his own happiness, he became her shield, her protector from a fate he could not escape. Back inside, Amara's hands clutched the folds of her dress, tears streaming freely. Her mind raced with confusion, anger, and sorrow. Why would he abandon her? How could love itself tear them apart? The priest began the vows, but her heart was elsewhere, lost to the man who had loved her more than anyone ever could, yet was absent because of the cruel, unrelenting curse that had shadowed his family for generations. And in that moment, both of them, one inside, one outside, felt the unbearable ache of a love that was perfect, pure, and yet doomed. The wedding day, meant to be the happiest of their lives, became a testament to love and sacrifice, a cruel reminder that sometimes even the strongest love cannot conquer fate. The days after the wedding were a blur of quiet sorrow and relentless questions. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Yet for Amara, time had fractured. The echo of laughter, the warmth of hands once intertwined, and the vision of him kneeling with a ring now felt like distant memories of another life. She wandered through familiar streets, the florist shop, the quiet riverside, the cafes they once visited, seeing fragments of their love etched in every corner. Each flower, each reflection in the water reminded her of him. But with each memory, a shadow of pain reminded her that the man she loved had chosen to vanish for her own safety. Amara's friends tried to comfort her, offering words of solace that fell like soft rain on dry earth. He must have had a reason, one whispered, something he couldn't control. But even understanding that rationally, her heart ached, a raw, relentless pulse of loss. Ethan, meanwhile, bore his own agony in silence. Each step he took away from the cathedral weighed heavily on him. Every smile he had to fake in public was a blade in his chest. He moved through streets shrouded in early morning fog, clutching the wooden box of family letters, a tangible reminder of the curse he had fought for generations and the sacrifice he had just made. In the solitude of his apartment, he traced the photographs and letters with trembling fingers. Faces of women who had loved and suffered haunted him, their stories etched into his conscience. And at the center of it all was Amara, his greatest love, the one he had shielded from harm at the cost of his own happiness. For days, they existed in parallel worlds, her grief contained behind composed smiles, his torment hidden behind distant gazes. They spoke only when necessary, their conversations clipped, polite, and strained. And yet, beneath the pain, an unspoken connection lingered, a tether that refused to break completely. It was in the quiet moments that Amara began to heal. She returned to the riverside where they had walked together countless times. She let herself remember the joy, the laughter, the warmth of his hand. She cried for the life she had lost, for the love she still carried, and finally, for the courage to let go. Healing was not linear. Some nights, she dreamt of him kneeling, asking her hand in marriage, petals swirling in the air. Other nights, she dreamt of him walking away, disappearing into the mist, and she would wake with her chest tight and tears staining her pillow. Ethan, too, carried his own sleepless nights. He imagined her happiness with every decision, picturing her laughing, smiling, and living a life untouched by the cruel inheritance of his family curse. It was his penance, his sacrifice, but also his hope, the knowledge that love could endure in ways even absence could not erase. One rainy afternoon, months later, Amara found herself in the same florist shop where they had chosen flowers together. Her fingers traced the petals of peonies, her mind wandering back to the man who had once held her heart. A familiar feeling stirred, not longing, but acceptance. She understood then that love is not only about being together, it is also about protecting the soul of the one you love, even if it means letting them go. And perhaps, somewhere in the city, Ethan felt the same. Perhaps he too walked among the streets, haunted yet relieved, knowing that the woman he loved most was safe, even if she no longer shared his days. The curse had won, in one sense. It had dictated their separation, but love, true love, had endured in memory, in sacrifice, and in the unspoken bond that neither time nor distance could sever. Amara smiled softly, a quiet strength settling in her chest. She would carry him in her heart, always. And someday, in another life or another time, they might meet again under circumstances free of shadows and fear. Until then, she would live fully, honor the love they shared, and find beauty in her own resilience. And Ethan, wherever he was, would do the same. The story ended not with a perfect wedding, but with a perfect love that had survived the cruelest of fates, a love marked by sacrifice, endurance, and the quiet hope that sometimes letting go is the greatest act of love of all. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear from your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.